Our topic today is Brainwashed by Darwinism, and I'd like to begin by asking you to share a defining moment from your own life.
The defining moment, I would say, was about 10 or 12 years ago when I retired from aerospace and did a lot of extensive reading. And I concluded that during my technical education in science and engineering, mathematics, that essentially I had been brainwashed into believing that Darwin evolution was established fact. So that was the defining moment that I realized, well, that doesn't stand against the test of what I now am reading, which is the alternate theory that there had to have been, because life and creatures and man are so complex that even 4 billion years is not near enough time. And as a consequence, there had to be, and the euphemism is a intelligent designer or a creator that that caused each creature individually to reach its stage as we know it today. And what I had learned was that the acceptance of Darwinism by actually the most intelligent, educated people of our world, it is faultable because there are so many challenges to Darwinism by what has been learned. And just to think of one item is during the 150 or so years where there has been an intense search for any kind of a fossil evidence of what they call a missing link or an interstep creature, and they have not found any.
Yeah.
Now the trouble with, or Darwinism actually was very brilliant theory. The only thing is, as far as my reading has shown, it's applicable not to the basic level of creature, but subsequent levels.
Tell us more about Darwinism.
Darwin was a very, very brilliant scientist, and about 150 or so years ago, he traveled to the Galapagos Islands, and there he discovered very unique creatures. And he began thinking about life and about how things evolved, and he noticed, and this is quite famous now, finches. And a finch is a bird, and what he noted is 11 different types of finches, different only in their beak shape. And from this came his theory, and then subsequently theories, and I think somebody won a prize for writing a book about his finches just recently. So he developed the theory that in the complexity of life, and subsequently to him, we have now the DNA. And the DNA, which we know is 3 billion base pairs. Now, occasionally, even in nature, there will be an error as we make an error, let's say, in our office or in a machine, and there's a reproduction error, and one of those elements changes. Well, the consequences, as we now know from genomes and humans and animals, is that has an effect. And Darwin's theory, and he is focusing now on these beaks, because what he noticed is each finch's beak shape was adapted particularly to the food source it had, the seeds that it fed on and where they were located. And so he evolved, and this is the beauty of Darwin evolution theory, that there will be a happenstance accident, and as a consequence, there will be a physical change in that creature or that animal or what have you. And from that, if it is beneficial, and this is where he got his survival of the fittest theory, and it works, and we are all aware of that, not only in the finches, but let's take the sun and earth, and we know that there are different shades of bears and people. There's white, there's dark, very almost black, and then in between. And what we know of the sun is that, and this is where his theory works, but it works actually at what they call the sub-phyla level. Phyla is a basic division in life species, animal and plant. And so what we see is that people whose ancestors lived, let's say in northern Europe, very little sun, so they tend to be tall. They are generally white, so that any of the beneficial rays of the sun they absorb, and they are healthier. And if by happenstance there's an error in the DNA molecule or the element, and those peoples generally die out. So as a consequence, after, I would say, hundreds or thousands of generations, we tend to find in people whose ancestry is that part of the world, they are white and tall, white-skinned. Same with bears. In contrast, those whose ancestors came from, let's say, close to where the sun, the equatorial, let's say Africa, there you would have those who survived best were those where they darker skin, where there wouldn't be the extremes, which essentially would cause, as we know, harmful rays and death. In between, like in India, would be in between. So in a sense, that's the cleverness of the Darwinian theory, and also where modern science has established its limitation. And reading books such as about the cosmos, which is the beginning of our universe, the life we know, which now is defined as 13.7 billion years ago. And incidentally, 10, 12 years ago, the closest science could come was somewhere between 13 and 15 billion. It's now been nailed down to 13.7. And the Darwin evolutionist theory is that all life began by happenstance. See, 4 billion years ago, there was our planet Earth. And our planet Earth was then an inanimate object, and here and there were pools of what they call prebiotic soup, inorganic, and zapped, however, by lightning. And lo and behold, we had first the slime. And by the Darwin theory, this gradually evolved over the billions of years into more complex organisms, eventually into life as we know it, all the animals, including man.
Okay, very interesting.